There was a demand to do this discipline. So you have to bring people together, make connections, and learn on the events, on the national and international seminars, to develop and set up a structure, a commission, whatever, building up a whole organization. It was quite a challenge. I came back in a wheelchair after 3 weeks hospital. I had to learn everything again and practice again from the beginning. But from then on, there was no more problem. There was no more limits. The sky was the limit. You don't care about little unimportant things in life anymore. You just focus on the important things, on the enjoyable things in life. You can easier understand the way of thinking of other people, so you're not so strict anymore.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Tokuskai Inside Look podcast. Today we're speaking with Patrik Demuynck Sensei from Belgium. Demuynck Sensei has been training for over 40 years, during which time he has been running the dojo AGEHACHÅ and is a member of the Technical Commission of the Iaido and Jodo in Belgium. Patrik Sensei holds the rank of Kyoshi Nanadan Iaido and Renshi Rokudan Jodo and has participated in the European Iaido Championships since 1993 and as a referee for the past 20 years. In this wide-ranging conversation, we talk about Demuynck Sensei's discovery of Iaido and the early days of Tamiya Ryu in Europe. We talk about how balancing budo and family, and the sudden events that may impact one's everyday life and budo training. It was a pleasure hearing the stories of grit and resilience in the pursuit of the practice from such an influential figure in the European Iaido community, and I hope the listeners are able to gain as much from this conversation as I have. So, without further ado, here's Patrik Demuynck Sensei from Belgium.
My name is Patrik Demuynck. I am almost 65 now and retired. I'm married, 2 children and 4 grandchildren, so happy family. I'm living in Belgium, a small village close to the French border, and I have been working in a local bank for more than 40 years as a commercial representative. In my childhood, I was a big fan of the Red Knight comics. One of the adventures was set in Japan, the land of the rising sun, and it was about samurai, loyalty, and the story of the 47 Ronin. I found that very fascinating as a boy because then I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. I was really fascinated by swordsmanship. That was then in the 60s, so there was no possibility to live my dream. There was nothing here. No cell phones, no computers, no internet. In the 60s, that was not the case. My main sports by then was just gymnastics, and later, as I grew up, some years of karate as well. And it was 1980, there was a kind of open sports day in my neighborhood, and someone did a demonstration of kendo and iaido. That was, wow, that was amazing to see. That was a hit, especially the iaido part, and so my adventure and my quest for iaido began. And by the way, it's still continuing after 40 years. But in Belgium, these disciplines were still in their infancy, especially iaido. We needed to travel, and that's why I traveled a lot to the Netherlands to follow training with Louis Vitalis. Maybe you know Louis Vitalis. He was a Yondan also, but he was in Europe the top of the Iaido teachers. So on Saturdays we drove for 3 hours, training for 3 hours and driving back then for 3 hours. That was our Saturday trainings. So yes, we did a lot of traveling to learn and to participate in seminars, events and other activities. And I still had to figure out for myself everything because I did not have a teacher yet. I was my own teacher for that time being. But then in 1993, in the capacity of a Yondan, I took part in the very first European Iaido Championships that was in the Netherlands, in Sittard. That participation in 1993 would really be the start of a wonderful new adventure. The leading sensei that was then Jodo Sensei, to whom we all owe a lot. He brought along a large delegation of Japanese teachers, and they all represented different styles of Koryu. Because until now, we just had learned about Muso Shinden and just a little bit of Jikiden. That's all we knew. But now we could also watch and try out different styles, like Shinkage Ryu, Hoki Ryu, and Tamiya Ryu. And I was immediately fascinated by the Tamiya Ryu, and it was introduced to us by 2 lady teachers, Jodo Sensei and Machida Sensei. And they were both members of the Odawara Tamiya Ryokai, and they were students of Fukui Sensei in those days. So then we met later, year after year, to train in Tamiya Ryu. And then I got my 6th dan in 2000. I was invited to Japan to meet their teacher, Fukui Sensei, and to get acquainted with him and to do training under his guidance. Following my request for a teacher, he could not come himself, but he agreed to send his best students to Belgium. That would be Katsumata Sensei. And that would be the beginning of a new story. Katsumata Sensei came twice a year, and together we developed Tamiya Ryu in Europe to an extent that now we have developed Tamiya Ryu in 10 different European countries. So each time when Sensei came, he stayed at my house and I received from him personal instructions. And eventually we became really friends, true friends. We studied and discussed the Iaido even in the morning at breakfast already. But there was no manual about Tamiya Ryu in English, nothing. Not even in Japanese. So there was a demand from all the students to have something on paper, something written. That's why from 2012, I started translating the Japanese guidebooks from Katsumata Sensei and from the Odawara Tamiya Ryu organization. And in total, that would become like 4 books, so that now everybody could have some basic information and a reference. I was also very motivated to translate because it is important, I think, that you stay to the original techniques as close as possible. Not to just make up for your own style, but follow Sensei's instructions as closely as possible so that no new things would be invented, but everybody stays with the basic learnings. And so from there on, with the guidance of Katsumata Sensei, we could just continue. And that is what we still are doing, continuing. Of course, now with this situation with the COVID, I cannot travel, they cannot come, but we keep in touch. We have conferences, we mail, we speak, we telephone. So that's how it is for the moment. We have to be patient. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that great overview of everything that you've done so far. I have a lot of questions, actually, going back from the very beginning. Maybe we could start with, you said that before you could do any type of martial arts, you had some interest, but you did gymnastics and karate. How serious was that? Was that something you just did on the side? Did you participate in tournaments, exams, and what was that?
Those gymnastics, that was just the sports, just to keep busy, just to keep in shape and to remain flexible. I was still young then, so that was no problem. But this karate already was like some kind of interest for Japanese martial arts and culture. Unfortunately, I did that for quite some years, but I felt that it was just about sports, just about the fighting and the competition. There was not a real Japanese taste in it. So I was missing something. Until that day, I discovered Iaido and Jodo and Kendo, and that was immediately a hit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you discovered it through that demonstration back in 1980.
Yes.
So you saw it, but then you didn't take a class under whoever was demonstrating?
Yeah, I took a class with him in the beginning, but it turned out that it was someone who had been doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. He had been doing a little bit of Kendo and he had been doing a little bit of Iaido, but he was not really into the disciplines himself. So we soon discovered that he was lacking a depth of practice. So we were looking for more, and that's why we expanded our knowledge and we went to Holland to other teachers to learn and experience more deeper things so that we could evolve in what we do and not stay on the spot, right?
And develop. How were you able to make that connection before there was no internet? So it's not like you search something. How did you find them and how did you connect?
It was about hearing say. I don't know who eventually mentioned that there was a teacher in Holland, but some way, somehow, we saw some promotional flyers or whatever, and we thought, oh, we should try and go over there, and that's what we made contact. So we had telephone at the time, so that was possible. And we were given a flyer and had the hours and the timing and the place where you had to be. So we had to move, and then we could start and make and meet and continue, and this is how it started and developed. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So until this point, it was like you were practicing by yourself in Belgium and you were going there for instruction. When did you see more of an organization develop either within your country or more even broadly in Europe?
Yeah, well, in those years, Kendo was actually the main discipline and they started to develop. So we as a dojo, we could, let's say, become a member with the Iaido part and then later the Jodo part as well. So it was all about making connections and being part of the 3 disciplines in Belgium, because in the beginning it was just Kendo. Kendo, that's all. That's why we brought in Iaido after a while and also the Jodo, so that we could become like now the All Belgian Kendo Federation, that would be all the disciplines together. Because in the beginning it was just Kendo. but there was an evolution necessary. So step by step, looking for the connections and then talking about it and making a structure and everything. I think I have been running in this organization from the beginning, first as a technical assistant, then as a secretary, then as a president, then as a vice president, and again, hanging along the organization in Belgium from the beginning. So that was our life then.
Yeah. Could you talk a bit about that, your growth? Because initially you were just a practitioner. How did you start getting involved with helping with the organization in terms of the technical director and then getting more into the administration? What was that path like?
Well, you have to set up, there was a demand also from other dojo to develop, to do this discipline. So you have to kind of bring people together, make connections. And what I had to do, and others as well, as a technical commission, to go and learn on the events, on the national and international seminars, to develop and set up a structure, a commission, technical commission, administration, and whatever. So building up a whole organization like other people do in other disciplines. Yeah, it was quite a challenge.
Do you remember any particular things that was especially hard, or anything that you were able to do that you're especially proud of in those early days?
Oh, not especially. I think it was kind of like, I think maybe most people have had this kind of building up structures to build an organization. I think it's not very different from other disciplines. I mean, the administration and everything, that's the same, but it was more about the technical points, the Iaido and Kendo and Jodo, that was not so well known by the people. So you had to make some publish, you have to do some open days to make people start to know those disciplines. And so step by step, you have to make some publicity so that people get interested and come and try and practice those disciplines. Yeah.
I know in the early days, the Zen Nippon Kendo Renmei had created the seitei, the standardized sets, so that they could somehow draw more of Kendo practitioners into Iaido. Was that somewhere where you guys were able to find, or did your Iaido practitioners come from elsewhere?
No, it came from over there, from this direction. We got it because most of our knowledge we got from this person I met from the Holland, Louis Vitalis. But in the very, very beginning, I still remember there were 7 kata. And then very soon after that, 3 more were added, so we had 10. And then some years later, they made 12 out of it. So now we are still those 12. And I don't know, maybe in future, more techniques will come. I don't know. We'll see. But yes, it was quite from the beginning, only 7. Yeah, so it was quite an evolution. Yeah, in the very beginning. Yeah, I still know those days.
And we know that those sets are come from a lot of different ryuha. And you mentioned that you were able to see a lot of different ones. Like there was one demonstration where a lot of different senseis showed.
Yeah.
Could you talk about up until that point, what were you practicing? Were you doing more seitei or more meditation ryu or shinden?
Yeah, what we did then was the Zenkan-ren Iaido techniques, of course. And we already started with some koryu. But as I told you, there was just Muso Shinden and Muso Jikiden. So we did not have many choices. By then, we practiced Muso Shinden Ryu, what we have learned on seminars, not knowing about the other things. Well, knowing about them, but never seen or never touched or never felt. But then when we got those people coming over in 1993, then that was the beginning of, I think maybe Jodo Sensei maybe did that on purpose, just to spread the techniques, not just to people locking in and the Muso Shinden or the Jikiden, but he wanted also to show new things, other teachers, other influence, other styles. I think he did that on purpose. And this was actually at the beginning of the spread of all those techniques in a way that maybe by now in Europe and maybe worldwide, I think maybe too many styles have spread by now. I think in the Ryuha themselves, different lines develop. So maybe by now, I think maybe there's an overload of different teachers and different, sometimes little details changing and everything, but all people making different lines and different, I don't know, maybe it has been a bit now over the edge, maybe too many different styles and influences, I guess. Not sure, but looks like.
Yeah, there's always the argument when we have seitei involved, you're always afraid that too much of the standard bleeds into the other styles, but then there's also the other way around. You struggle with incorporating all the different styles into one standard. How did you choose Tamiya Ryu?
It's just, well, we loved it from the beginning. It was like love at first sight. I mean, that was actually a style we had never seen. It was quite different from what we had seen so far. The Shinden and the Jikiden was not so, those two were not so different, but that the Tamiya and then also the other guys from Suyo Ryu and Shinkage and whatever, that was quite different. And the fact, two ladies, we thought, how is that possible? Two ladies teaching Iaido, but they were very good. And it was just, let's say, love at first sight. I mean, yeah, just fascinated by the techniques and the way they explained and how it was done. And then, yes, and that was it. It was a hit. Yeah.
And because it wasn't written down only recently, or have you started translating some of these guidebooks, how did Tamiya Ryu spread in Europe then from there? Could you talk about the history and the process of getting this one art around?
Well, when we started teaching it, people came and they liked it, so they wanted to be part of the Tamiya Ryu as well. So in the beginning, there was no books, there was no nothing, there was no writing thing, no nothing. So all that people learned was on seminars and dojo and in schools and everything. There was nothing really written, so they had to write it down for themselves. I always had my books, my writings, but it was always in Japanese. Not that I'm so good in Japanese, but I had it translated for myself. So I could at least people make understand and show how to do it. But they wanted, after a while, people want the book. So if they have seen something, a new technique on a seminar, and they have doubts after, how was it exactly? Was it this book like that? Should we do like this? They needed some guide. So they said, we would like something in English. Could you do that so that we can understand and take it with us? If we want to study, then we can study later on. And they said, okay, I will try. So I started to translate one with my poor Japanese, but it was enough to understand everything and the teachings I got from Katsumata Sensei. So I made a translation for him, and then I presented my book and to the other senseis in Japan, and he said, yeah, it's okay, it looks fine, it's good, you can continue. And then that was it. And then I translated number 2 and number 3 and number 4. And now they have the whole set, like you have at the Muso Shinden, you have the Shoden, the Chuden, the Okuden, and then the sparring techniques. So we have the same in Tamiya Ryu now. Everybody has the same notes, and they can now study and do the same thing in the same direction. Yeah.
How were these other countries, these other dojos doing Tamiya Ryu started? Was it similar to you where they were originally doing Muso Shinden Ryu or Muso Jikinin, and then they switched over? And then how did that grow?
Some switched over, but you cannot do that to any extent. I mean, if you're a Yon or a Godan, it's very difficult to start switching. So those groups were rather small groups, not really beginners, but let's say starters, maybe a Shodan, a Nidan or so. And they come to me and they wanted to try this style because they have seen it on a demonstration or on a seminar or whatever. And they think, we like it, we would like to do that. And so that's how they loved it as well, and then they come and learn it. And yeah, but I mean, not the high level people, because as I said, it's difficult to switch a style. For me, it was already kind of limit as a Yondan, changing to the Tamiya Ryu, because I had been doing before some Muso Shinden. But in those days, we were not able to do that many choreo because we did not have many opportunities to study. But starting from this famous 1993, then from there on, we could really focus on one style and then continue on that same style and work on that to develop. Yeah.
I've heard from several people that you travel quite a bit around Europe to either teach in seminars or something. How did you start getting involved with all these different dojos and these different seminars?
Actually, they asked me. You meet them on a big seminar, and then they say, yeah, Sensei, would it be possible? We would like to do Tamiya Ryu. Can we do that? How should we do it? What should we do? And in many cases, people were still involved with another teacher or still involved with their organization. So I explained them that they should first, of course, explain to that teacher and to their responsible people. And then if they agree, they join the Tamiya Ryu, then they can come and then they can start teaching then, and then they can be accepted also with the blessings of Katsumata Sensei. So you must communicate and talk about it, and then they should first of all ask their responsible people if they can join, and then if that agreement is there, then they can continue in the Tamiya. Yeah, which is like in other schools as well. And that was actually mainly in the beginning. By now, I don't think many people changed their Ryuha because there are so many and they're widespread over all Europe, over all world. It's not done anymore now. I mean, people have chosen some direction, so most of them stay now in this direction. Yeah.
So that seems like a common thing I'm starting to hear especially in developing countries, that they would go to an international seminar, they would see a sensei and something about their performance of the art, similar like you when you saw Tamiya Ryu, something that resonates with them, and then they go ask to join that line. How do you see that right now in terms of growth in developing these martial arts? Is it important? Is it something that you try to do more, where you get people to demonstrate and then let the local people choose who do they want as a sensei or who do they want
Yeah,
as...
well, I think it's very important, first of all, if you want to do a real Koryu, that you have your own teacher. You should have your own Japanese teacher, okay? That's the main point. And in this case, I have one. So after consulting my teacher, that I could accept other people from other Ryoha, in case they were in another Ryoha, of course. But I think for many people, it's most important if you can have your own Japanese teacher. And I know I'm not Japanese, but I am very, very closely connected to my own teacher. I do not think that many teachers have that same possibility. Many of them start to have the dojo, and then their teacher is then a European teacher. That in many cases is then a Japanese teacher, or even another European in between. So I think how closer you can get to the original Japanese teacher, the better. But that is not always possible, of course.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were able to develop this strong relationship with Katsumata Sensei. Could you maybe talk about anything that you remember from all the years you've been with them? Are there specific experiences or instances that particularly stick out in your mind?
Well, yes, I experienced that. They say style is not changing, but it's changing all the time, even the choreo. So he could explain to me what were the latest, not changes, but influences, but also in Japan, over there also the teachers sometimes have an influence of an insight, and they talk about things and they think, maybe if you do this technique a little bit more like this, it should be better. So those kind of changes were brought to me by Sensei. And like we talk on breakfast, and he could explain the new things. And then he could also talk about other insights about Japanese culture and about habits that were in the past, things that were like this, and then it was like that, and then the new techniques and everything. So it was part of culture as well, not just Iaido. Iaido as a discipline of a sport, but it was more open, and it brought more of the Japanese culture and habits and way of doing. He brought that more in and closely to me. So that was more easier to understand and feel the difference that were in the different styles and living and thinking and how to act and how to behave and what's the spirit behind it. Like one example is we have one technique in Tamiya Ryu that is actually the name of a kata, but it is also used as a way of exorcism. They call it Akuma Barai. Maybe you have heard of this Hakone Taikai in the past. It has been there for, I think, 20 years, just 20 years, I think. My first teacher, Fukui Sensei, was actually the one who set up this Hakone Taikai. So on this Taikai, before they start, there's always kind of like an opening ceremony. And then on that ceremony, there is this kata Akuma Barai that is performed by one sensei. It's kind of like purifying the area, chasing away evil spirits so that the place is safe and pure, and then they can start the event. So this kind of elements are in this Tamiya Ryu as well. Yes, it's just very close to cultural, and yeah, I like that very much.
I'm sure that for the years with Katsumata Sensei staying at your house, there's certain things that I don't know, he might be influenced by European culture in a certain way, you are influenced by Japanese culture. Do you have or remember any instances where you're like, oh, he's starting to understand European culture, he's starting to act a little differently than a traditional Japanese would?
Well, the first thing he tried in the beginning, he had bought himself a book of Netherlands, Orandago, because he wanted to try and communicate at least a little bit with us, like in Dutch. But he found it so difficult he had to stop it because he could not really, it was too difficult for him. And also the way of cooking and the way of making breakfast and everything, which is not the same like in Japan. We develop new things, a new way how we prepare lunches and dinner and everything at home. So yeah, that was for him quite fascinating. I don't know if he ever did it at home himself, but for him it was quite an eye-opener. And so yeah, well, we tried to bring him some culture, Western culture we spread. We did some excursions. We went to this and this place in Belgium to show some of the culture and the buildings and everything in Belgium. So he liked that very much, yes, yeah. We give him every time a little tour, something new, yeah.
When you go to Japan, what do you like to go to? What are trips like? Or are there any specific ones that you remember that are especially impactful to you?
Yes, well, my most intense experience was in 2006 when I was in Japan for 3 weeks to prepare for my Nanadan examination. Sensei received me at his house and together with Oda Sensei, unfortunately, who passed away 1 or 2 years ago now. He was always in Belgium for seminars in August. So both of them took care of me, dragging me along to prepare for my Nanadan examination. The seminars here brought me to this teacher, then another day to that teacher, then to another teacher. So preparing completely. So the things I experienced, I was in little dojos, like in the dojo of Ueno Sensei for 1 day, very small special teaching by him, and then another dojo and another seminar. So that was quite an intense and very intense 3 weeks, and I was lucky to pass my Nanadan then. But they had me well prepared, yes, and that was very intense. That was the most intense experience in my life in Japan, yes, also physically.
Could you describe that in more detail? Like, what was a day like? What was a practice like? Were you just go, 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 go? What were they asking of you? What did you have to do? How were you recovering from each session to go to the next?
Yeah, well, in most cases, they were just sitting by the side in the little dojo, and then you had to perform, then you had to practice. And practice, you said, no, 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 not like this, a little bit more like that. Okay, yes, okay, more and practice and practice. And then show another count, no, this is not good. What do you do now? So a lot of corrections, and it was very intense because it was very sweaty. You on your own, and then you got 1, 2, 3, or 4 people watching you, giving comments, correcting you. So by the end of the day, sometimes you did not know anymore what you were doing or why you were doing it because your head was full of all those comments. So that were the small events. So in the personal dojos, but there was also bigger seminars, like 1 or 2 or 3 days together with other people, and then you sleep together in common rooms together, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, or sometimes down on the floor on the tatami. I mean, it was quite different, quite diverse. All those experiences, yes.
I can imagine, like, if you're just practicing by yourself and several senseis all watching you and you have to go, well, that is super intense. So I want to change it up a bit. We've talked about practice. We talked about spreading art. I'm just wondering, in the years that you've been doing and helping out with the organization, how has the rest of your life blended into this work? Could you talk about how work and family, you mentioned you have 2 kids and 4 grandkids. How do those all fit into this world?
Yeah, that was kind of making a puzzle every time, okay? So in the beginning, I started with the 3 disciplines, Kendo, Iaido, and Jodo. But after a while, it was a bit too much because maybe you have experienced yourself, but if you only practice once a week, 1 discipline, I mean, a couple of hours, that's not enough to really make a great evolution. So, and if you do 3 disciplines, that would mean you already have to have 3 trainings a week. And then, so I had to make choices. So I skipped my Kendo and just continue with the Ai and Jo. And after a while, yeah, it's kind of making like with the kids, how can you do and the wife and in the evenings, and then being there the moments they cannot be there, and then having busy work, and then you have evening jobs to do, and it was very, very intense. And well, I still don't know if I think about it. I don't really know how I did it. I think I have a wonderful wife, and she accepted what I was doing. I was quite a long way from home. But things went better. Once my son was 7 years old, he wanted to do like his father, Iaido with the sword. So he started to do Iaido as well. Then it was easy to take him with me as well to the trainings. And so by the age he was like 16, 17 years old, he already had his son done already. But then he stopped, you're young, you go all and everything, and the girls and everything. And training was on the Sunday morning, and in the middle of the week, that was not good for him. He had to go to school. So on the Sunday morning, on the Saturday, they go out, young boys, they have a drink, and so they come back early in the morning. So that was not a good time, early in the morning on a Sunday, then to go for training. Finally, he stopped his training. But that period was quite good. He could go with me. It's like, I think, like other people, if they like cycling and they have a boy or a girl and she wants to cycle as well, and then they go with them wherever they want, they support them. So that was the same for me. I could support my son as long as he wanted to come with me, so that was easy for me to travel. But then, yeah, and then it's about making the balance in your life and do the things that you have to do, but don't forget about your wife and your children. So making the balance and between your work. So yeah, it was quite intense. Yes.
When did you start seeing that it became easier? I'm just wondering because you could just picture work and family and all this. And as you're getting higher in rank, you have even more responsibilities too. So when did you start seeing it kind of go over the hump and start becoming a little easier?
Yeah, well, once my children were out of the house and they were living together or married, and then I got more and more invited abroad to do seminars for teaching, for training and everything. So, and my wife had her own hobbies. From then on, it went slightly, it became easier and easier. Sometimes I was still like, again, out again. When will we do something together? Later we will do something together. But yeah, still. But without the kids, it was already better. That was in 2014. I just retired from my work, from my job. That's now 6 years ago. I got very ill. I got a brain tumor. Yeah. So I had 2 major operations and I came back in a wheelchair after 3 weeks hospital. I had to learn everything again and practice again from the beginning. But from then on, there was no more problem. I could do whatever I wanted. I could go wherever I wanted. There was no more limits. The sky was only the limit. So I could do what I know. So for the time being, I'm quite well now. So, and by getting older, everything is settling down and it's getting easier. And so, yeah, so good now. No problems at all.
Oh, that's so good to hear that everything is back to at least in a better, healthier position. Could you maybe talk about the rehabilitation? What did you have to go through? Like you're coming out of the hospital, you're still in a wheelchair. What were the steps that you had to take to get back into?
Yeah, that was quite intense. I mean, I had those 2 operations, quite long operations, one of 14 hours and one of 8 hours. They could remove the whole tumor. It was not malign, so it was not a bad one. They could take everything out. But when I came back, the problem was I lost 20 kilos. I was very slim then, and I am not a big boy, so I had to learn to walk again, building up the muscles. I had to learn to speak again because I could hardly say my name because all the rest was gone. So write your name, writing again, reading. Every day people came, a logo and kine and everything. Day by day, building up everything step by step. But it went quite well. And I think my drive, my passion to go for this martial art again, to continue Iaido and Jodo, I think that was the main issue that got me going again. Because if there would not have been a drive of those martial arts, I think maybe I would still be sitting in my wheelchair over there. So that really changed me as a person and my character. And I was happy. I was able to recover and to do again my first love, my Iaido and my Jodo. Yeah.
You said it changed your character, you
Yes.
as a person. Could you talk more about that? What?
Yeah, but you don't care about little unimportant things in life anymore. You just focus on the important things, on the enjoyable things in life. You can support, you can, you can easier understand the way of thinking of other people. So you're not so strict anymore. And you're more open and your character is more softer. And you can accept easier things that you could not accept before. Now you can okay, I can live with that because it's not that important in life. There's more important things in life. Just being healthy is main issue, and for the rest is like minor points you don't care anymore. So no.
Do you have an example of something that you came back, recovered, and then you experienced something and you're like, oh, if it was the past me, I would react differently than how I would react now?
Oh, that's hard to say, but maybe less strict in discussions and everything. And less strict. If something is not the way you would like it to do or the way you see it, you would not interfere that much anymore or that strict anymore as you did before. You would take it easier and go with the flow and okay, more accepting what other people think or do without making a deal out of it.
Yeah, speaking actually of the other perspective, I would love to hear your perspective on selling the sword to Gergely. Could you talk your story of that event?
That must have been one of the evenings when I was in Hungary on a seminar. We might have talked about sword. I think he told me that he would like to buy a sword, but financially that was for him not possible. That was too expensive. And I told him, I had to change my sword because it was, for me, getting a little bit too heavy. I could not handle it anymore quite well. And I bought myself something lighter. So I had this sword available. And I told him that I have one sword available. So if you're interested, you can try one, you can see one. And if you're interested, you can buy it from me. I will make a nice price for you because I know financially it's not easy. So I brought it for him and he tried it and said, oh yeah, fantastic. He was immediately in love with it. And so I said, okay, try it out. And then we made a little price he could afford, because for me, money was not the main issue. I was rather happy that I could give the sword to him rather than it being here in my room, staying there and doing nothing. And he was very happy with it. And I told him, Kevly, take care. It's a naughty one. It once cut me, so be careful. It might cut you again. And it did. So did he not tell you that?
No, I don't remember him saying that he cut himself.
Yeah, yes, he cut himself once. A nice cut through his arm, so yes. It was very sharp. It was a very good weapon. But you know, when you have reached a certain level, there is the need to use a real sword. Because using a real sword, sharp one, a shinken, is not the same EI you do as you did before with the practice sword, which is not cutting. Because every time you draw the sword, every time you put it back, you have to be careful because it is so sharp, just touching your skin, you're bleeding. It makes the intensity of your training, it makes it much more stronger, much more deeper. No room for mistake. You have to pay big attention. You have to pay attention every time, yes.
Could you talk about we talked about some of the senseis that you had the pleasure to train with and to get to know. Are there any particular meaningful relationships you've developed outside of these Japanese senseis that are especially meaningful to you? Any people either in Europe or in your country that you think is important for helping you develop in your practice as well? And
I think other sensei help you just not knowing they're helping you. I mean, what is important, I think, is to observe a lot, other sensei, other teacher, to observe a lot and to not steal the good points of them, but maybe to think about them and say, this looks really good. If someone is doing or showing a technique like this, this is good. So you can learn from them, not really by being taught by them, but just by observing and by taking over the good points you see, and then you can use it in your own practice. Yeah, that is not like other people teaching me, not necessarily. We talk about it when we meet other people from our level, like 7 dance on European championships. We talk about things, but it's not about teaching each other. It's about exchanging ideas and insight, and then talking about and discussing about things. That's the most useful things you can do. Yeah.
Approaching the latter part of this, I have some more questions that are shorter ones. You can answer as long or short as you want, but just interesting to get a perspective into things that you enjoy. What would you consider a comfort food? So something that if you're feeling down or you're feeling tired or sad, that you can eat it and it just makes you feel good.
My comfort food would be definitely ramen. Absolutely, yes. We make this every week. Every week on a Saturday, that's our ramen day.
Oh. Well, what is your recipe? What kind of ramen is miso, tonkotsu, shio?
Oh, we use fish or we use meat, depending on what we have available. And then mushrooms we put in there. And what else do we put in there? And some onions and wakame if I have this in the house. And yes, it's a little bit depending on. And then I make the stock myself. It can be fish or meat, whatever. My wife loves it and me too. And so that's our Saturday dinner.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you a dog or a cat person, and why?
That's difficult. I did have a cat. We did have a cat before we had the kids. And at home, when I lived at home in my own town, I had a dog. Well, I like them both, but maybe a cat would be more enjoyable because you don't have to go and walk with her every day. The cat does it by herself, and the dog, you have to walk your dog out. And so, yeah, I would prefer a cat rather. Yes.
Do you have a quote or a proverb or a motto that you enjoy that you think about?
Yes. My motto or my favorite is the Japanese saying, Nana korobi ya oki. Fall down 7 times and get up 8 times.
Oh.
Meaning, it's also a very nice proverb. It's often written on Japanese sake bottles. I think they want to laugh with the sake, But I think the idea behind is never give up. Whatever happens to you in life, whatever happens, a misfortune, whatever, Don't give up, always get up and do your best and continue. Fall down 7 times, get up 8 times, always get up. Never let you down, no. There's always something that you can use that will give you new energy to continue. So don't let down, never give up, just continue.
That's great. What would be the best compliment you've received, or what is the achievement that you feel most proud of?
Oh, the achievement. I think developing this Tamiya Ryu in Europe, I think that is one of my biggest achievements because, as I told you, when I started in 1993, it was not existing in Europe and not in Belgium, not in Europe. And by now we are 2020, there's like 10 countries where they practice Tamiya Ryu. So doing this together with Katsumata Sensei to develop a new style in Europe, I think maybe I'm proud of this one. Yes, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for putting in that effort. I can certainly appreciate that part of growing Iaido community or any of these arts is to introduce people to things that resonate with them. So some people might like Shinden more, some people might like Eishin Ryu more, some people might like Tamiya Ryu. But if it didn't exist, then you wouldn't have people practicing. So I think it's great that you can have these different viewpoints so that we can build up this community and build up this type of character. Yeah. Thank you. So to end this, do you have any closing comments that maybe you want to share with the audience, something you think about that you think would be helpful to people listening, or you could just react to anything else?
I think a good lesson for everybody listening, by getting better, your personality should grow lower. I mean, I don't know how to exactly put this in English. As you get farther and deeper in what you do, you should develop your modesty more and more. Some people are getting very proud of what they do, and big looking on the others like they are the best, but I think the better you get, the more modest you should become. I think that is the best lesson. And whatever you do, be it karate or another sport, it doesn't matter. The better you get, the lower profile you should use, I think.
Thank you so much for that message. I could see that in yourself as well. So I'm very happy to have had this conversation because I can see how humble and modest you are, and yet you have so much knowledge to share. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, very good.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode because we have a lot more exciting conversations to share as we explore the world of the traditional Japanese martial arts. The Inside Look podcast is available on most common podcasting platforms and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe to not miss out on new interviews as they are posted. We're always looking for feedback to improve, so please write us a review or drop us a line at podcast@tokushikai.ca or on Facebook and Instagram at tokushikai.canada. Until next time, thanks for listening.